Romain Grosjean walked away from one of the most horrifying crashes in recent F1 history at the Bahrain Grand Prix. The Haas driver's car pierced the barrier, split in two and burst into flames on the opening lap of the race, yet seconds later he was freeing himself from the flaming wreckage and leaping to safety with the assistance of F1 doctor Ian Roberts and medical car driver Alan van der Merwe. It's a testament to the decades of safety work undertaken by F1 and the governing body the FIA, including the introduction of the Halo cockpit protection device, that Grosjean not only survived this crash but did so with only minor injuries. The FIA will conduct a thorough investigation into the crash and many more details will be uncovered to understand the full scope of both the accident and Grosjean's escape. But based on what we know so far, here are the key factors that prevented a tragedy unfolding in the Bahrain Grand Prix. How the barrier gave way. The ferocity of the crash was rooted in the speed Grosjean was travelling and the lack of time to decelerate before a sudden impact with the barrier after he'd collided with the AlphaTauri of Daniel Kvyat. Grosjean hit the barrier at an angle rather than head-on. High force crashes are not uncommon, but it's rare to see them occur with exposed barriers rather than with the added protection of Tech Pro or tyres. While questions have been raised about why the barrier failed in the way it did, it's possible that the sheer force of the crash, combined with the angle of the hit, meant that kind of barrier could never stand up to the impact. The FIA's tools will have recorded the force of the accident, and it will be of great priority for the FIA to ascertain why the barrier was penetrated and if anything can be improved within that structure and that design in the future. That part of the circuit is certainly an unusual place for a car to go off, but a large part of the FIA's safety work has always involved preparing for the unexpected. Why the car split and caught fire. Once the front end of the car had pierced the barrier, it became trapped. From that moment, to dissipate the energy involved, it was structurally unable to retain the rear of the car. With the monocoque containing the driver held in place, the energy led to the rear of the chassis coming away from the driver's survival cell. This part is designed and specified to firstly protect the driver in extreme impacts. The chassis being trapped in the barrier meant that the energy of the heaviest part of the car, featuring the engine and gearbox, led to the structure around the fuel tank that is usually part of the survival cell failing. While the fuel cell is made of Kevlar and rubber and ballistically tested, the impact in Grosjean's accident appears to have been extreme enough to have damaged it or torn out some of the connections, leading to the fire. This structure is part of the survival cell and forms the closed bulkhead behind the driver that the engine bolts onto. The battery pack was among the debris that came away from the car in the impact, and it's a possibility that this very hot component could have played a part in igniting the fuel, something that fortunately we now see very rarely in F1. The vital role of the halo. Despite the violence of the impact, the car separated in a way that meant Grosjean was still protected within the cocoon of the car's survival cell. But the images of the car buried in the barrier were every bit as uncomfortable to look at as the initial fireball. Though the monocoque survived and protected Grosjean's body, without the halo his helmet would have surely struck the barrier at force. The halo was badly maligned by some for ruining the look of F1 cars when it was first introduced, but it's proven its worth on several occasions, with Grosjean the latest of a number of drivers who can be incredibly thankful the FIA ignored the complaints and pressed on with the halo's introduction. It should also be noted that despite the shock of the impact and the frenzy of the fire, Grosjean was still able to extract himself from the remains of his car quickly and leap over the fence to safety, showing the halo is not an obstacle to a swift escape even in a compromised situation. Dr. Roberts said the arrival of the first marshal on the scene with a fire extinguisher was vital as well, as it managed to push the flames back just enough to allow him to reach Grosjean and help him over the barrier. Once it was clear Grosjean was shaken but largely okay physically, the priority was to check his breathing wasn't compromised. While his visor had melted in the flames, an investigation of his helmet after he'd taken it off showed no signs of smoke getting inside it. Medical car driver van der Merwe, a fine racing driver in his own right in the past, said what Grosjean managed to do in escaping from the wreckage, losing a boot in the process, was pretty amazing. He added, "It just goes to show all the systems that we've developed, everything worked hand in hand. Everything worked how it should, and without just one of those things, it could have been a very different outcome." There's no question that F1 and the FIA will take this very seriously and learn as much as possible to find ways to prevent any similar accidents ending in such frightening circumstances. Fortunately, in this case, lessons are being learned from a scary crash that a driver survived with only minor injuries.